Dastan Kadyrzhanov. When I first saw this manly figure who looks more like an athlete than a philosopher, I had no idea that deep down inside he is a poet. Personally, I got used to Dastan as a historian, political scientist, orientalist, and expert on various issues. And I must say that Kadyrzhanov is indeed a very competent specialist.
Biknur Kisikov, writer, author of numerous novels, stories, and poems, member of jury of literature contest, inspirer and organizer of Kitab Fest festival, founder of Kazakhstan Encyclopedia Project, encyclopedia.kz.
Dastan studied Oriental history. He graduated from the Institute of Asian and African Countries at Moscow State University. Kadyrzhanov is a professional diplomat. He even has a diplomatic rank of first secretary. Although I am not very familiar with the diplomatic ranking system, so I have no idea what this means, but it sounds really important. After working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kadyrzhanov started his private business and established the Dala TV television company. In 1996, he headed the Television and Radio of Kazakhstan Republican Corporation. And after that, he worked as a financial director and chief producer at the Khabar agency. Dastan tried to stand for Majlis elections. However, for some reason, he didn't succeed. Dastan didn't give up and continued his career as the general director of the Zhitisu Television and Radio Company under the Almaty Regional Council. Today, Dastan Kadyrzhanov is a member of the board of the Kunayev International Fund. He is often being interviewed by the media in his expert capacity. By the way, Dastan is a polyglot. He is fluent in Kazakh, Russian, English, French, Dari, and Farsi. He seems to be quite an extraordinary figure, right? But what about creativity, you might ask? In fact, it has always been an integral part of Dastan's life. And in his career, he has always been trying to be diverse, mastering multiple facets of numerous arts. Kadyrzhanov, for example, left his mark in the cinema. He acted as the author of scripts, as producer, and even director. His filmography includes such films as Besid Bol, Elephant, Kazan Gap Tournament. But poetry has always been his biggest passion. He penned several poetry collections, such as Little Stories of Great Loneliness, Sufi of the Night, The Story of the Good and Kind Guy. Whether it is the mind that is lazy or because of the lack of imagination, but sometimes you really fail explaining existing circumstances. Something is meddling with logic, or it is emotions that conquer it. It might be that there are problems in education, which are reflected in skipped lectures. It can be that negative traits outweigh positive ones: selfishness, vain, banality, and lack of spiritual development. So what does rule the world? A plan or an element of circumstances? A free will or ethics? Or lifelong commitments? What amount of motivation should we have to act one way or another? On what shall we focus our potential? On declaration of war or on a small purchase? Sometimes a war can be insignificant and a purchase can be important. Sometimes the nonsense of a poem can be stronger than the state's discipline of paper. Also in 2019, in co-authorship with Ajijiro Komano, he wrote a novel named The Heart of the Homeland. The book depicts life in the fictional country of Kazakhstan. According to the plot, a blogger, businessman, civil servant, and a writer find themselves in the Republican Center for Transplantology, and they all fight for the same heart. Interesting setting, isn't it? Now add to this impressive list several plays and collections of satirical stories that were published online. But today we'll focus on something different. Today I wanted to talk about the author's free verse novel, The Story of the Good and Kind Guy. It was published in 2013 by the fiction literature publishing house. Free verse, or vers libre, is a form of poetry that does not comply with the rules of classical poetry. The genre doesn't use consistent meter patterns, rhymes, or musical patterns. This form of poetry was widespread in Europe in the 19th century, in particular among French symbolist poets. Soon the fashion for vers libre came to Russia. There Turgenev, Fett, Bryusov, Balmont, and many others tried to write in free verse. I do not remember any such novels that were previously published in Kazakhstan, and probably I will not go against the truth if I say that this was, actually, the first free verse novel in the history of Kazakh literature, especially that it was written in 2 volumes. And that is something formidable. After all, today to read 1,200 pages of poetry can be considered quite challenging. Our contemporaries are not very fond of long reads, especially poetic ones, and definitely it is hard to imagine what efforts the author had to make when he was writing this novel. So how can an amateur writer present his work to the world, bypassing book publishers and avoiding serious expenses? One of the most popular writers of our time, Stephen King, in his own On Writing Memoirs of the Craft autobiography, advises aspiring authors to send their works to literary magazines. According to him, they should keep sending their writings until, finally, they will be published. After all, that was something he did himself, and this is a good opinion for aspiring Kazakh writers, given the fact that the first online literary magazine, named Daktyl, was launched at the end of 2019. This initiative belonged to philologists Sergei Kim and Anton Zemel. They wanted to create a platform that would help readers to find some interesting fiction written in Kazakhstan and assist authors in publishing their works without camping on the doorsteps of publishing houses or without turning to Russian magazines. The idea was supported by the Open Literary School of Almaty and Ilya Odigov's School of Creative Writing, Lit Practicum. So far, the magazine has only 4 sections: poetry, prose, criticism, and publicistic writing, and children's literature. But the website creators plan to expand this list in the future. The novel tells the story of a biblical teacher, his apostles, and their way to their enlightenment. It is a story of becoming a good and kind guy. From the very beginning, the novel presents a kind of chronological dissonance. For example, Pilate calls Cephas the apostle, or Peter, on his mobile phone. And meanwhile, Peter is talking about Wall Street. Matthew the apostle, in his turn, is arguing about Che Guevara and the Windsors. And this is something that doesn't fit into the biblical canvas. But then you get used to these deliberate time distortions, as there is no concept of time in the novel at all. The events unfold in both the past and in the present, and sometimes even in the future, in all possible time dimensions. We all follow the steps of Napoleon's, Bismarck's, and Tashunko Uitko. You were laughing out loud in the Marquis of Salahadin and clapped to the theories of Lobachevsky. Do you remember how you were dying as Jew and Zulu in the ghetto? How you were crying at the funeral of Pope John Paul II? How you were running with the Red Guard down the streets of Shanghai? Played the creation of Stradivari, his Santa Maria. Build Columbus's Santa Maria. Do you recall how you were calculating Reba? How the bullet perceived your Red Army helmet? When you shot Che Guevara, saying Christian has killed non-believer, and there is no sin in this. When you buried your sword but invented a rifle. So laughing, my friend kept stinging me, and I knelt down. Who am I, Rabbi? Who am I? Definitely not me. And he laughed. Dastan takes liberties with the interpretation of those events. I would even say that he does it in a certain postmodern manner, where the boundaries of the genre are blurred and where there are no rules, and where the storytellers relate to all the themes that have ever worried humanity. For example, they talk about architecture and arts, collectivization and the Holodomor, Hitler and Mossad. Kadyrzhanov was able to fit in his writing almost everything. And between the themes, various wisdoms gradually emerge in the form of Sufi, Chinese or Jewish parables. This is exactly what makes this meaningful novel so deep. And on page 382 of the first part of the novel, the great Hagan of the ancient Turks, Mahdi, enters the conversation with the apostles. And this is simply phantasmagoric. I wonder what books does Dastan Kadyrzhanov read, since he has such a great imagination. And there is more to this. The tragedies of the Aral and Semey, problem of the West and the East, and environmental issues become the center of apostolic conversations. Dastan is literally unstoppable. With all this incredible fantasy, the appearance of the planet Nibiru seems like a completely ordinary occurrence. Nibiru, or as the author refers to it in Tengrian, Tanayar, is a new analogy. It is a new world to where, as once to the Wild West, a part of Earthlings rush. And each of them is looking for something dear on a new planet. Caucasians look for mountains, Kazakhs look for steppe, and Russians seek frost. Newly fledged Niburians are trying to build their second Paris or Beijing. And it seems that here it is their new life. And there should not be any earthly passions in it. But that is not true. Where there are people, there is stratification. And so a new caste appears among the colonists. They are called the Watchers, or Stonecutters. These new people take everything under their personal control. People rebel against them. People try to fight them. Riots flare up everywhere, but the usurpers are vigilant. They take all kinds of measures to curb their people. How familiar does this sound? The Watchers go further, trying to limit the migration of Earthlings to Nibiru. After all, it's the Earthlings who cause the troubles. But the appetite comes with eating, and their next desire is, it is even scary to imagine, the destruction of the planet Earth. Why bother with small things? No Earth, no problems. But here come heavenly forces interfering in the conflict. No one dares to mess with heaven. Angels destroy all the inhabitants of Nibiru, and a deserted planet flies away. And that's it. Then events unfold in compliance with the Bible. Judas betrays Jesus, and the man is executed instead of the robber, whose Arabic name is Barabbas. An earthquake happens, the suicide of Judah follows, and a prophecy comes true. Meanwhile, the novel continues with the story of another apostle. This time it is John. John talks with Gabriel Archangel, and a new battle unfolds before the eyes of readers. The apocalyptic war. This is a war between Mahdi, the savior, and the false prophet. The battle between light and dark. The heavenly army defeats the vast army of Dajjal and overthrows his generals of Yajuj and Majuj, and the promised golden age begins. As you can see in this huge novel, many other books are combined. And in the end, the author leaves the reader thinking, but what was all this about? And who was it? Who are you? Answer. I will laugh and cough. Same way my dear friend would do. And I will say, no need to worry, brothers and sisters. The answer is near. Can't you see it? Didn't you realize it yet? Who has always been next to the dear one? Who wouldn't leave him even for a second? Who loved and loves our brothers? And who is destined to meet them again? Who went to Nibiru and built a pantheon? Who saw Cephas cutting hungry man's hand? Who was on the mountain and walked on water and saw the transformation of a dear friend? Who saw the great Arab, the enlightened prince, forerunner and Rabbinu at the same place, at one blessed hour? Reader, don't you understand? I am thou. The novel can be perceived in different ways, and it's better to read it slowly, savoring every syllable, letter, quote. And like the novel Ulysses, one should read the novel with comments. But the most important thing is not stories, not form, not insane intellectualism, not the beauty of this incredible masterpiece. It is wisdom, the wisdom of being a good and kind guy.